So in my last video, I talked about some of the biggest winners of the NBA free agency and offseason period. Well, it's time to flip the script, and again, let's have some fun and shit on some folks, shall we? And talk about the biggest losers in this NBA offseason and free agency period. And as always, there are winners, and then there are those non-winners, the bums, the losers. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of them. And these teams are on here, this list, for different reasons. Some it can be because of free agents they brought in. Some could be because of players they lost. In some cases, it could be the players that they resigned and the amount that they. It could be a combination of things. It could be any number of things. Let me go ahead and talk about some of the winners and losers. No, just losers in this particular case. Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the biggest losers. I'll go with the Toronto Raptors. They gave DeMarre Carroll, the fifth option in Atlanta this past season, $15 million a year, basically off of 2 years of performance and reputation. $15 million a year. And then they throw in $7.5 million to Corey Joseph. And yes, he was a good role player for the Spurs, but again, $7.5 million. You know, when you look at the fact that they lost Lou Williams, they lost Amir Johnson, you know, it feels like in a way while the Raptors kind of reshaped who they were a little bit, it feels like they're making lateral moves or downgrades. I don't necessarily see where they upgraded. So that kind of makes them losers. Not ones I'm going to rant about tremendously. The Oklahoma City Thunder, though, it's really baffling to me what they were doing. They give Kyle Singler $5 million a year over the next several years for reasons that are still unbeknownst to me. And then they decide that they just got that Cantor fever, and they can't live without Enes Kanter, and they've decided they're going to match the offer sheet he signed, and they're going to give him almost $18 million a year. So a few years back, this organization traded away James Harden in part because they didn't want to pay 3 guys max money and get into the luxury tax territory. What are they doing now? They're basically paying 3 players max money. Would you rather pay Enes Kanter or James Harden max money? And no matter what you want to say about James Harden, is he really that bad to deal with? I mean, you couldn't have found a way to make that work. It's so much better with Enes Kanter's no defending ass getting max money. Holy Christ. The Boston Celtics. While I like the trade for David Lee, and I think he brings something to the table for them, I really just don't like what else they did. They gave a hustle guy like Jay Crowder $7 million a year. That's baffling to me. It's one thing if you do it for a year or two, and maybe in part you're trying to gamble and hope that his upside is a little bit better and he becomes a little more than basically a hustle player. But for $7 million a year, it's just unnecessary. Similar to Avery Bradley getting $8 million a year last year. It's because you have the money to spend doesn't mean you should spend it in these type of ways in these type of places. And then furthermore, you gave Amir Johnson $12 million a year. Amir Johnson. If I was going to pay some type of big man that type of money, I would have rather paid a Tyson Chandler $13 million a year like the Suns did. While he's not the same player he was and his skills are on the decline, I don't exactly think Amir Johnson's going to be a whole lot better than he has been. I mean, he's been around the league a long time. You gave Amir Johnson, a guy who's going to play the 4, $12 million a year. Wow. So that's almost $20 million a year tied up into Jay Crowder and Amir Johnson. I got to look at the Detroit Pistons, too. There's probably an eventuality that they were going to lose Greg Monroe, and frankly, if Andre Drummond they thought was the future and the better player, that's the guy they had to go with. He's going to be cheaper for them now and going forward, they felt. I can understand. The fit of him and Monroe together was kind of a square peg to round hole. You know, 2 guys trying to play a similar style, 2 kind of lane clogging type of guys. You know, so he had to go. But you lose a Greg Monroe in free agency. That most certainly hurts. So you definitely don't get better, I don't think, anyways. And then to compound things, you sit there and give Reggie Jackson basically a max contract, 5 years, $80 million. You're basically making a statement that Reggie Jackson is who you're going to be building your team around going forward. An average, at best, NBA starter is now getting close to max money and could be a franchise player for Detroit. Yeah, that makes them losers, period. Got to look at the Dallas Mavericks, too. I mean, while I like the signing of Deron Williams because it's very little risk and potentially a lot of reward, this is a team that lost out on DeAndre Jordan. which most certainly set them back because it also meant that they missed out on other big men in the free agent market, or they didn't bother to re-sign Tyson Chandler when they could have very well have perhaps just done that. All the while, they decided to give Wesley Matthews max money, a guy in his late 20s who's about a 13, 14 point per game scorer at the NBA level, damn near max money, coming off of a torn Achilles. I don't see where Wesley Matthews makes you that much better than what Monta Ellis brought to the table at the two-guard position, to where you're going to pay Wesley Matthews $6.5 over $7 million a year more than what Monta Ellis is going to end up getting paid by the Indiana Pacers. I mean, that's bad. You know, and you look at the fact that they don't have Tyson Chandler down low anymore, so who's going to be that presence at the center position? They lost out on DeAndre Jordan, who was their big target that they pinned so many of their hopes on. The money they gave Wesley Matthews, they let Monta Ellis go. It just wasn't a good offseason for the Dallas Mavericks, in my opinion. Another big loser, I think, has to be the NBA salary system and the structure of that system. This is fucking madness. This shit has to stop. End of the bench guys shouldn't be getting $6 or $7 million a year. Adequate to solid role players should not be getting 8, 10, 12 million a year. Average to good starters should not be getting fucking max money. Again, these NBA front offices, these GMs, these executives are acting like the 6-year-old, 5-year-old. They just got $10 on their fucking birthday card and they can't go wait to buy some cheap-ass plastic toy that they're either going to lose interest in or break in fucking 2 days. But they're doing it with millions upon millions of dollars. So these teams are going to sit there and try to sit there and bitch about how they're losing money. They're going to sit there and try to collude to reduce the amount of money that's going to go to the players once those new television revenues come in, that new television deal kicks in, so that way they can control the amount of the salary cap. Well, if you ran your fucking business better, if you managed your money better, and if you didn't spend it like a drunken fucking sailor, maybe you wouldn't have to sit there and play these fucking games. Maybe you wouldn't have to sit there and lose damn money. When you've got organizations paying Amir Johnson $12 million a year, Enes Kanter and Wesley Matthews almost $18 million a year, you can't feel sorry for them because they've created this environment for themselves. They've created the problem. You most certainly can't expect them to fix it. And all it does is throw everything all out of whack. And again, at some point in time, those chickens are going to come home to fucking roost. And when they do, it's going to lead to a lockout. It's going to lead to some bad, bad things, mark my words. But I think the biggest losers of all have to be the Sacramento Kings. And why not? They're the fucking Sacramento Kings. You know, they've got their best player is DeMarcus Cousins, and he probably doesn't want to be there. He's a bit of a pain in the ass. So you sit there and fire your coach that he actually got along with him alone, so that way you can hire George Karl, who doesn't get along with him. So that way George Karl can try to be the snake in the grass and try to trade him away or get everybody in the organization to turn against DeMarcus Cousins so that way they can trade him away. And then, of course, that doesn't happen. So now this team decides they want to sit there and go into free agency and trade away freaking their first-round pick from last year, Stauskas. They want to sit there and trade away Jason Thompson and Carl Landry. They want to trade away a future first-round pick. They want to trade away potentially their position in 2 future drafts in the first round. So that way they can use the salary cap dump of the Philadelphia 76ers and get a couple of draft and stash second-rounders. Not so that way they can get stars. Not so that way they could really affect some positive change. But so that way they could give $10 million to Rajon Rondo for the fuck all of it and give almost $30 plus million, excuse me, over the next 4 years to fucking Costa Koufos. They're paying $8 million a year for Costa fucking Koufos. They created all this cap space so they can lose out on Wesley Matthews. They can lose out on Monta Ellis. You know it's bad when these players who are trying to get paid as much as they can are turning down more money from the Kings to go elsewhere for less. And sometimes those situations aren't even that much better in the grand scheme of things. The Sacramento Kings gave up a future first-round pick and the rights to swap first-round picks in 2 other drafts along with role players like Jason Thompson and Carl Landry and last year's first-round pick Nick Stauskas, so they could create cap space for Rajon Rondo and fucking Costa Koufos. Certain teams are good because of the good moves that they make. And then teams like the Sacramento Kings are the dysfunctional disgrace that they are because of the stupid shit that they do. They traded away future picks, last year's first-round pick, a couple of solid NBA role players on decent contracts, mind you, for cap space, 2 draft and stash guys, so they can take that cap space and make it fucking Rajon Rondo and Costa Koufos. Because you got a head case in DeMarcus Cousins, a head case coach in George Karl. Let's bring the ultimate of head cases in the NBA and Rajon Rondo into the fucking fold. Of all the losers in this NBA offseason and free agency period, you'd be hard-pressed to tell me that the Sacramento Kings were outdone by anybody. They are the biggest loser. Goodbye.